So, welcome to our first live Advanced Higher Computing Science event of 2026. We're thrilled to have you join us. We'd love to hear your feedback, maybe give us some of your information, your thoughts on any resources that you might use. You can email us at support@stacs.scot and give us suggestions, tell us what you're using, tell us what we need to do, tell if it was useful, tell us if it wasn't. Please let us know. You can also use the email for any general inquiries you've got about STACS or even computer science in general. Somebody will pick it up. But of course, remember, we have the fantastic STACS Connected site. There'll be a fantastic member of the computer science community that will contribute to helping you out with your problems.
Thanks, David. We're on our welcome and introduction just now. Then we're going to go on and look at a software design and development UML, and we'll be looking at that for about 20 minutes, depending how many questions we have. And then we're going to look at a database UML, and we will finish off the main session with project questions. So hit us with any questions that have come up while you've been doing projects, or for looking ahead for next year's projects even. And then we will, as usual, kick about for the after party for any other questions that you might think of. And remember, as David said, you can always contact us later. So without further ado, we hope this is a useful and enjoyable session, and let's get started on our discussion.
So I used UML at Strathclyde, and we used to call the course SAD. It was System Analysis and Design, System Apps. We called it SAD because it made me sad. Oh, the class was hard going.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've not used it since I was at uni, apart from this.
Yeah. I genuinely believe when it comes to UML that a lot of teachers fumble their way through it, kind of teach it to a standard, but everybody's pretty insecure about it because it doesn't happen often at all.
Agreed. And there's not a huge amount of marks in the project for it, but as we go through marking it, we do see a lot of problems with it where pupils aren't getting the marks. Grand. So, thanks everybody for doing your sticky note. It's good to see you all joining in tonight. And let's move on now if we can, and let's have a look at what the course specification and the course assessment task say about use case UML diagrams. So we've put together this slide and you can see there is not a great deal of information or detail here. So on the course specification we can read describe, exemplify and implement UML use case diagrams using actors, use cases and relationships. That's about all in terms of the course specification. On the course assessment task, we've got the UML use case diagram showing integration. Note, that wasn't in the course spec, so integration has appeared here and that's an important one. Showing integration and defining the actors, the use cases and the relationships and the marks that go for that in the project. We've got 2 marks in total. To get full marks then, we're looking for candidates to have complete, detailed and integrated, there's that word again, use case diagrams that meet all of the evidence required, including integration. So again, emphasising the integration.
And can I just say there, I just think that is very vague. There's nothing written there about boundaries. There's nothing written there about includes or excludes. And I just think from what many teachers have already said in the previous slide, you've not done UML for 20 years and you sit down to try and find out what's going to be in the course and that's what you're presented with. I think that's one of the reasons why it does seem so daunting.
Yes, because there isn't a great deal of detail there, is there, as to what we're expecting to get back from pupils.
So let's have a look at the shapes that we use for UML and start getting into it in a little bit more detail.
Right, so I'm sure that everybody in here is already familiar with the shapes, but just in case there's any misconceptions out there, we want to have a look at them again before we get started. So we know that we define our system boundary, and that's using the rectangle, and that's showing what the user sees, and that's the system that they actually interact with. For the Advanced Higher project, the system is the program, Python, Java, C++,
Or it's the web and it's the front end of the project. It's actually what the user interacts with.
But what if our pupils are doing databases as their major, so a big database project? What are we expecting then as being within the system? Is it the database itself?
It's not really, because that's one of the misconceptions. And the use case represents the end user requirements, and that's what they see. So for the project, the end user interacts with the web, they interact with the program, they never actually interact with the database. And sometimes the pupils find it difficult because they are their own end users. Sometimes they find it a wee bit difficult to separate that because they have to be both.
So the detail inside the system boundary is not for the database, because the database is shown as an actor outside the system boundary on the right-hand side as we look at this diagram.
That's right, because the database is the back end, and what we're actually talking about is what the user sees as the front end. But you've just led us right in perfectly to actors there. So we know that the customer, or the player, I'm just trying to come up with some scenarios that the pupils will talk about, is the human actor. The database is also an actor, as you can see from the diagram. Can you think of any more that we see quite a lot of at the project?
Well, yes, there is one, and I'm thinking that a lot of pupils read some data into their project, just as they would do it at, say, a higher level, for instance. I'm thinking of a quiz where they've got a file that has questions and answers in it, and they're reading that into their Python program. They put the questions and answers into an external, either a text or a CSV file. So where would we show that on a diagram like this?
So you would probably put that at the top, over on the right-hand side where we put the database actor, because I think the consensus is that the human actors go to the left-hand side, but all of our files go over to the right-hand side.
Okay, so I'll remember to bring that up because I do have some pupils that are going to be reading data in from external files. I've got a couple of programmers that are doing a big software project.
The other part that I've found some people struggle with is the include and the extend. Personally, I tend to forget about what way the arrows go. I know which one is include and extend, so I'm fine with that, but I always have to go back and double check the direction the arrows point.
I'm exactly the same, and I got hold of a fantastic rule. The rule I got was really helpful, so what she said to me was, the arrow points to the use case that must happen. So if you look down at the include label in the given diagram, when you use an include, as you know, it means that must happen. And usually, well, a lot of the time, we're talking about a validation. That's always a good one. If you have an input, it must be validated, so it's included. And because it must happen, the arrow will point to that validation. The extend option, because that's a might happen or a might not option, the arrow points back to the previous use case, because that's the one that must occur. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does. And I like that we've got a rule there to help us remember it. And I think now I'll try and pass that rule on to pupils this year and in the future, because they like a rule or some way to help them remember things, don't they? I know I do.
So I know that now we're going to look through an example. I think it was an STD one that we're going to have a look at. And we put a link in for the course assessment task just in case anyone needs to get it downloaded. And it's on that slide there, isn't it? Is it just a matter of clicking on that? Perfect. So the examples there are great. I find them very useful personally and also useful for our young people to look at and see what the required level is and how to put forward a description of the problem. So here is a screenshot of the STD task example from that. I'm not going to read it out loud. We can all have a look at it ourselves. We probably all know it from having looked at the new documentation that came out for this year. So let's just take a minute and have a quick read through it. Give us a thumbs up when we're ready to move on.
Cool. Okay, now we have a little stack of notes for some audience participation. So let's remember that this should be from the end user's point of view. For advanced higher project level, there should be at least one end user and the database. There may be more, but those are the minimum. So on the post-its, what do you think the actors are for the scenario? Okay, there's a scenario there. So if you can use the post-it notes, please.
Okay. We've got player. Absolutely. I agree. That's what I'd be putting in, since it's a game we're talking about here, isn't it? It's a kind of Tetris-style game. And the database is the other actor. Absolutely. So we've got a player and a database. And we've moved on to our next slide, and we have now included them on our UML. So we now need to have a wee think about the main use cases. Often pupils think that the use cases are the main methods, but no, this is not the case. In fact, the end user doesn't know anything about the procedures or the functions that are within the programme. So this is really about the main actions that the user wants to be able to do within this task. Again, please use the post-it notes to write your thoughts. And here comes the scenario, not expecting you to remember it every time.
Thank you.
I can see someone has put enter the name and enter the answer. Also sorting the names. Right, good stuff.
I've got a question on this one. In the bullet points, it says display the top 10 scores. Would that translate into the players wanting to see the scores?
Yeah, I mean, would that not be... I put this one down to get player info from the database. So then, would the sort method need to be put in as well? If we got sort.
It says it wants an insertion, doesn't it? Right, let's pull up the solution that we came up with.
So you can see that we kept this quite high level. We have a play game rather than going into the entering the name, entering the answer. And the reason that we did this is because when we were having a wee chat, we were thinking about if you were developing a game and you said to the end user, I have got a game, what do you want to do? And especially pupils, they are going to say we want to play the game. And we thought, actually, do you know what? That is what they would say they wanted to do. So we kept that as our main use case. We've also got view of the top 10 scores for the leading onto the leaderboard, and obviously connected that to the database. But please remember, everybody, this is just one example answer. This is an interpretation of it. There's other ways, there are other answers that pupils could come up with and that everyone in here could come up with.
Yeah, when we discussed this, it made sense for us to do it from the end user's point of view, that this is what they would want to do. This is the most important thing.
Yep, that was right. And again, we've got them both connected to our actors. So let's move on to the next slide, and hopefully again we're giving you techniques as we move forward here. Okay, we have tried to think about it in terms of inputs, processes and outputs, but being very careful not to go right into functional requirements, because I think from the pupil's point of view, as soon as you think input, process and output, I know in my mind you think, oh, functional requirements. What inputs would the user have to do? Let's have a look at the scenario again and see what the inputs are for this programme. Okay, let me grab a sticky post-it note.
People on the call have added number of sides, a letter for the position, name and letter. Thanks. Right, let's have a look at the UML.
So, as you can see, we've got use cases stemming from the play, and that's because you only enter them when you play the game.
Right, that makes sense. So is this part finished now?
Well, actually, it's not really. The relationship between them needs to be identified. We need to think about it, and we come back to it being an include or an extend. So let's try something a wee bit different. Can we get a thumbs up here if we think it's an include, or one of those weaving hands? That's like a weave, isn't it? Type a hand in for extend. So a thumbs up for include and a H for extend.
Okay, that's fine. Yep.
And everybody's right. They are all includes. And this is because they must happen. So when you play the game, you must enter your name, you must enter the position, and you must enter the number of sides. So let's move on to the next frame, and we'll have a wee think about calculations.
Okay, so time to grab a post-it again. Let's have a look at the scenario
and see what calculations now need to be carried out. We're just kind of approaching this one wee stage at a time. We're not trying to do it all at once. We're building up one at a time. Have a look at the scenario and bring your post-it and let us know what calculations need to happen. Yeah, I don't think we need to spend too much time on this one.
So we're basically looking at calculating the score.
Okay. So before we move to the updated UML, let's anticipate. Would calculate the score be an include or extend? Again, let's go with thumbs up. We can see here already, we thought it would be an include. And that's because the score must be calculated.
Absolutely, because as we know, it is going to be displayed in a leaderboard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not optional.
Can I just make sure that I've got this? It's another include because it has to happen when the game has been played. Right, that makes sense. And for my own benefit, I'm thinking of the arrow. And the arrow points from the play to the calculate score.
Yep.
So let's have a wee look at the output next. So we're going to look at the scenario again. And can everyone have a wee think about what are the outputs? What would the end user see on the screen? If I take this away and just have a wee think, is there anything else that they want to see? There's the leaderboard. Is there anything else that they want to see when they're playing?
Okay. So we've got the name. Yep. Should see their own name. And they should see their own score of the player. Got definitely the score of the player. Okay.
We had a discussion and noted it didn't explicitly say for the user to view the name and to view the score. So we put that in because we had a discussion about if you were playing a game, you would want to know what your score is and you would want to, have it interacting with you, your name. So that was why we added that one in.
Yeah. And of course, this would then be reflected in our user and functional requirements.
Of course it would, because the use case should lead on to the user requirements. But you would still be pulling some stuff out of there, wouldn't you, for functional requirements?
So, our next slide is looking at standard algorithms.
So, here is a key question. As part of an advanced hire project, what are we doing with all our inputs?
I'm laughing at that one because, of course, we all should all know the answer by now, and that is that every input must be validated. We've just added that one in because we didn't think that we really needed to have any participation at this point, since we'd already discussed the need for input validation. But I understand that they have to be included because they have to do it. Just one wee thing though, we just wrote valid. We've not said what the validations are. Is that important?
No, I think basically at this level, this is top level. It is sufficient simply to indicate that validation of inputs is happening. The detail of how it's been validated would be in the functional requirements.
So, we're showing our input validations and their standard algorithms, albeit at National 5. Do we also want to show our other standard algorithms on our UML?
Let's move on and have a look.
Before we do, just to go into that validation point, when I'm kind of teaching the difference between functional requirements and end user requirements, I tell the pupils that the end user requirements kind of shouldn't really have that technical detail or that technical jargon.
And if we were putting validation down, with whatever validation it should be, or with the data range or whatever, that would always be the technical jargon. The end users are not worried about that detail. They just want it to be validated.
Yes, they're not really aware of what's going on under the hood as it is. So, we've moved on to our standard algorithms, our second one, and we've got our lovely little stack of posters. I love these by the way. Now, what was the standard algorithm that was being used in this scenario? In fact, it is an insertion sort.
I couldn't have told you it was an insertion sort, but I knew it was a sort, definitely.
So, just looking at the UML, it just says the sort there. Is that the same as the validation? I mean, that you don't actually have to see what type of sort it is?
Yes. Again, we don't need to say at this level what kind of sort it is. So we've got a sort suggested, and absolutely we're just showing it as a sort. It's top level. We would, of course, have the type in the functional requirements, but on your UML diagram, top level sort leaderboard is quite sufficient.
Guess that makes sense because the end user doesn't know what a bubble sort is. They don't know what an insertion sort is. So, okay.
Okay, so this is where you have to perform either an insert or an update to the database. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. But it's important to note that for any project, you only have to perform either an insert or an update. You don't have to do both of them. And for the last time tonight, well, on this part anyway, let's get to our post-it notes and decide, is it an insert or an update that we're doing?
I guess you would need to specify insert for this arrangement, because does that mean every time the user plays the game, that goes into the leaderboard rather than updating a name and score that's already there?
I think it was every time they played the game.
Yep. Right. That's fine. Okay.
The UML also shows connect to database here to add the players.
Yeah. Name and score every time. Okay, that's great. And here's the final UML for us. It made sense with it being a software task to think in terms of kind of input, processes and outputs, but only from the end user's point of view. So hopefully this will give you a technique, a strategy that you can use to tackle this one stage at a time. And hopefully the pupils in your class will be able to use that as well.
Can I just check in with everybody at the moment? I know we've kind of finished one. How's that gone so far? Can you use some of the reactions on Miro? Has it been okay? Anybody have any questions? Or do you think, have we gone a bit off at a tangent? Or are you okay with where we've ended up? Brilliant. Let's move on to the database one. So again, try to come up with a technique for how we would go about doing this. And this time, obviously, there's no input, process and output. So what we thought about was to look at the SQL that has to be run. Let's have a wee look at the scenario. And again, this is from the course assessment task.
Okay, I'll just give everyone a few minutes to read this. If you can do the same again, just give us a thumbs up when you've read that.
And for my colleague here, you need to read it properly because I'm going to ask you to pick out the 3 queries that have to run. Oh,
Oh, that sounds like fun. Okay. I'm waiting for your thumbs to come up, by the way. And I might put some wrong answers out there just to be corrected.
right. So, what have you got then? What are the queries?
So, the first one, I got a sub-query to find the customers who haven't paid their bill.
Woohoo, well done.
We need to calculate a bill, like a new bill.
Uh-huh. For that you get a wow.
having to list the customers whose bill is higher than the average.
Right, and for that we're doing a wee celebration. Well done.
I'm taking that, yes!
Right, let's have a look at the final UML. We're not talking through this one. Like last time, we're going to just move on to the UML now.
Okay, so things that stand out is that there's a use case for the queries. There's one for connect to the database. Let's see, our two inputs are being validated. So we can see our standard algorithm there.
Absolutely. And if we look at the top use case, we've added an extend because it makes sense to us that you would want a message if there are no outstanding bills. But while it's not explicitly stated in the scenario, this would be reflected in the user requirements by us if this was our project.
Okay, and then just kind of working down, looking at the middle use case. In the scenario, it said calculate and display, but in the diagram, they've been separated into two use cases. Was there a reason for that?
Well, when we were drawing that diagram, we carried on splitting up inputs, processes, and outputs. So in order to display the bill, you need the two inputs, and then you need to calculate the new bill. And that's why we split them up.
Okay, I think that makes sense to me. I can see that to find the people who are paying too high a bill, you need to calculate the average.
So hopefully what we have gone over tonight will help you. Maybe it has given you a technique to share with your students on how to create UMLs. We haven't put a solution up to the web task simply because we wanted tonight to be a quick session. We wanted to give people a chance to kind of ask about projects as well. But if you think a solution to the web task is something that you would like, you can let us know at the end, or, you know, we can work on it together, and who knows, maybe you want to work on it and put it on STACS Connected and we'll have a wee look at it. But before we go on to talk about projects and just have a project check-in and talk about them, obviously it is that time of year, Mad March, when the kids are doing their projects. Is there anybody who wants to comment on this UML session or reflect on this one at the moment?
Again, we just hope we've given you a bit of a technique that you can perhaps share with pupils to help them create their own UML diagrams. Right, let's move on. So, project questions. You guys have been in before. You know the drill. We will try and answer what we can. If we cannot answer tonight, we'll do our best to get the answers and post them into the STACS Connect. So please, grab a sticky note. Any questions that you've got, we'll do our best to answer them, or if you want to talk to us, please talk. How's everybody's projects going?
I'm actually having a nightmare. I've managed to get things working with a dev container, but of course now I have to get that onto the pupils' GitHub and get them to make suitable adjustments. So it's just, messy.
Is it still a technical issue for you? I mean, even just asking some of the teachers that are on this call, I'm very interested in the technology and the tools that teachers are using to teach advanced higher. So many teachers are using different tools and different systems, and different people have different issues based on their kind of IT environment within their authority or their schools. So even if you want to just let us know about that, I'd be quite interested to find out what tools you're using or planning to use next year for the delivery of advanced higher.
Well, my big issue is after our cyber attack, they took away the USB ports and then we lost XAMPP because of that. I then found a way to use SQLite doing an insertion, and just this week they have stopped the pupils from being able to download GDBC, because it's Java that I use, from Teams onto the computers. So every time I find solutions, and XAMPP obviously, it gives you lots of issues as it is, but I thought, I've cracked this using SQLite, and if anyone would like to see that, I've got it for both. This only works obviously going from program
to database or major database to program because I don't need my PHP, so I don't need the web server. I've got code in both Java and Python. If anybody would like that, you're more than welcome to have it.
Yes, I can empathise with that, because I know you've put a lot of time into doing your MySQL Lite. Just in the last few weeks, haven't you?
What was really good about it is that I got it working because there's some pupils that use Python. When I do the online stuff, I've also got pupils in my class that choose to do Python, and I've got 2 pupils also doing C++. It worked for everything. And it was really easy. And now they've been so careful after the cyber attack, which I completely understand, but it's so frustrating.
Well, that's where I am, because we can't use certain resources. We can't plug anything in. We're not allowed to hotspot because we don't use phones in any way or any mobile devices, which is why I've ended up on GitHub. But that's been way beyond my level of expertise.
Can we address that point submitted on the post-it notes about whether the projects do or do not require inserts and extends? I know we've got 2 markers in here.
I would be very careful with that one, if I'm honest with you, because there's been, I'm sure we were talking about this in the past while we were just starting the new course, we were a bit more, generous. But I think that we need to be careful that these should have includes and they should have extends where necessary.
Yes, I think that would be our expectation of what we would want to see on their UML. Absolutely.
If you're planning on using Python with SQLite, I've had a chat with the principal assessor about this because I was moving to SQLite. You must check, because in Python you don't always have to have some of the connections. You must have it to open the connection, and you must have it explicitly stated to close the connection. You've got to be able to see that. Do you fancy sending an email to STACS, and I will send you through the code that I've got, because I've had that all checked that it's okay. So, if you pop an email into STACS, like I said, I will send you a quiz example I have done, and I've also got the electricity task done. I will send that through to you, and then you'll know what has to be in there.
Yeah, I might be making use of that as well now, because my pupils doing Python and GitHub now can't get their SQL.
And can I talk about, if you're using Python and Thonny along with SQLite, many schools may already have Thonny installed. So do you then have to get separate libraries for SQLite for it to work with SQLite, or is that SQLite library already built to Python?
It's already built in. You just put up an include or import to include SQLite 3.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm just reading one of the questions that were submitted. Sorry, I'm not sure who was typing it. About a game. Yeah. So I've got a couple of pupils who are making games, and they're using a 2D array for a board and an array of records for leaderboard. You ask, can they use 2 main structures? The answer is yes, you can. However, when you're declaring your requirements at the beginning, I think it's FR3 and FR4, although I don't have them in front of me, and it says to you what is the data structure that you're going to use. So the one that states right at the beginning, what is the data structure you're going to use, at that point you're going to see that it's your array of records that you're using, because that's the one that you're using on the standard algorithm, and that's the one that's going to be marked. Regarding your 2D array for the board, that would be an additional functional requirement, and then you would include that in with your additional functional requirements. I've got a few pupils doing that as well, so just make sure that array of records is that top functional requirement and the other one's down the bottom. And those of you that do Python, please, 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 I'm begging you to remember that when you declare the array of records, when you declare the 2D array, make sure there is an indication of the data type in there. We must have the name of the array, we must have the sizes, the elements of the arrays, and we must have the data type in there as well. And even if it is just putting in a comment line beside it when in some way that would be perfect. Or if it's a string, if they put in inverted commas, but we must be able to see a data type. Is there anything else? Can you think of anything else based on what's been asked?
Well, I guess one of the points that we talk about a lot is, remember, if somebody's doing object orientation and they're using Python, just a reminder to make sure that they're using their getters and setters and they're not just treating it like an array of records. They are actually using object orientation and polymorphism and all the rest of it. Yep.
And I know that some of you'll be the same. What is really frustrating is that arrays of records are an advanced data structure. So if you'd said that, it would have been fine. So if you're saying it's an array of objects, you must use your array dot notation in the code. There must at least be getters or setters inside that class when it's declared up the top. And that is a common error, isn't it? We see that all the time.
Yeah, good point it is, and particularly for pupils using Python, for instance. Yes, where I think it comes down to a bit of a confusion and are not always fully understanding when they're using inbuilt classes within Python. Someone on the call just raised their hand in the chat. You go for it.
Hiya. I just wanted to go back to what you said about the array of records and the data types. Okay, what did you mean there? Did you mean in the design? Or when you're actually declaring a structure and you would usually have the kind of data types at that point?
Hi, that's a great question, thanks. The answer is both. So the issue is that obviously Python doesn't have an array of records. So at higher, we're teaching classes really. So what a lot of the pupils are then doing when they get to advanced higher is they're not progressing with that knowledge. They're still using their higher knowledge. They're not using getter and setter methods and, private and public. They've not done that in the design and they've not done that in the code implementation. And if you look at it, they're just accessing that information directly as if it's an array of records. And that's not object orientation. That's not demonstrating advanced higher knowledge. So therefore, they're going to potentially miss out on a lot of marks because their misconception was, I'm doing object orientation.
Thanks, I get that, but it was more what was said earlier about arrays of records and having to explicitly say about the data types. I do understand what you mean about getter methods.
Good point. It's actually in both places. Just to be clear, I'm not an expert in Python at all. However, when you declare that record, if they don't see the data type, just get them to put a hash and enter a comment line afterwards and just write if it's string or integer, whatever. And then we can see that. We know that Python will do its implicit conversion, but as long as they are identifying the data type they want in there. And then when it comes down to their array, to do the same as well. And I know that sometimes you don't have to put in your sizes as well, but it can go into an internal commentary line. Again, I've got some examples. Email STACS if you would like me to send a copy.
Amazing. That would be all right. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. A big thanks to the teachers who joined us in this session. Your presence and engagement really helps us all to dig into the key ideas within the materials. Very much appreciated. That's the end of this evening's session on UML. Bye everyone.